you, everybody. Coming at you live from out in the woods with another exciting video. Alright, this video is about an unknown survival knife trick. Okay, but before I show you the trick, I'm going to ramble on for a little bit about some of my philosophy. Now, one thing, this is a trick using a knife, if you have a knife only, okay? This is a way for turning a knife into a chopping tool, okay? A lot of people are going to look at this and they're going to be along the lines of, why don't you bring an axe? Why don't you bring a machete? Yes, I agree 100%. Bring an axe, bring a machete. It's a good chopping tool, you can't beat it. But you might be talking about camping, bushcrafting, hiking, you know, outdoorsy type stuff. Actual survival is where those rare times when you get into a bad situation and all you have is a knife. Now, as far as I know, nobody's shown this tip, okay? Nobody has shown it, all right? So I'm showing it. Maybe you can use it, maybe you can't, but it's something to put in the old noggin to think about. All right, so before I get to showing you the tip, first I want to do a little bit of cutting tool philosophy real quick so that you can kind of get into your mindset of how you can think about cutting tools and what you have with you and how to use them, okay? So let's get started. Let's talk about my philosophy on cutting tools and how you can look at it when it comes to this situation, okay? There's a difference in this and this, and you could look at it two different ways. Some people would say that this is a knife, some would say this is a big knife or a machete, okay? Now, another way you can look at this is a contact tool and this is an impact tool, all right? So the characteristics of these things are different and you have to think of it in forms of survival. As in, if you have nothing with you and you're going to get some chert or some flint and take a rock and bust it into pieces and try to make you a cutting tool or tie it to a stick and make an axe or tomahawk type tool, you have to think about what you're going to be doing with the tool. Is it a contact tool or is it a impact tool? Now, if you have a contact tool, all right, here's the way of looking at it. This is for cutting, carving, and slicing. It is a contact tool. And what that generally means is that you are in contact, okay, with what you're doing, okay? That is a contact tool, okay, cutting, carving, and slicing. An impact tool, contact tools are generally very small and very sharp, probably lightweight. If you have an impact tool, the impact tool, you swing and it makes impact with your wood, all right? Now the difference between that is an impact tool generally has more weight and it has some length behind it, something that you don't have with a knife, all right? Now that we've got that clear, let's move on to the next thing we're going to talk about before I show you the trick. Just hang in there with me, because all this stuff is a build-up that makes sense to what I'm doing, all right? Now, how many times have you folks seen this? How many movies and TV shows have you seen this on? Okay? You've got the real tough guy standing there with a growl on his face. You know, he's growling. Oh, I got my survival knife tied to a stick. All right. A lot of people share the philosophy, and I do too in most cases, that there's really no reason to tie your knife to a stick. Okay? Well, at least not unless you're Rambo's second cousin or you happen to find yourself on the set of a Discovery Channel show. Now, the idea behind tying a knife to your stick, I'm not real sure about this thing, but it's kind of overdone. It has its places, okay? Like, if you take a tree and you're going to shake a tree and try to get the fruit or things out of it, if they're not loose, if for some reason you need to cut some stuff down, then you can tie your knife to a stick if you want to, okay? That way you can just reach up and cut you some things down out of a tree, whatever, okay? Fruit, nuts, I don't know, whatever. The other thing, there's a misconception that people use these things as a spear. Now, the idea behind a spear is to stab things. There's a possibility that you could stab something and this could fall off or break off into something and run off with it, and you're lost. That's not real good tactic, but that's something that's depicted on the movies, like, you know, Rambo jumping off that big thing and stabbing something, you know. Like I said, we can't all be Rambo's second cousin. The other thing is, you could think to yourself, well, I need length, so I'm going to tie my knife for chopping. No, that doesn't work because all the pressure is on the binding, and you don't necessarily have the length for chopping. That's where the unknown survival knife trick comes in that I'm fixing to show. The other little thing that I was going to talk about, because there's not that many reasons for tying a knife to a stick, other than, you know, cutting things out of a tree. At least not a knife of that bulk. See this? This is a little bitty mora. It's been tied to a little bitty stick. Now, the only useful reason for tying a knife like this, like I said, it's not so that you can go stab wild animals or shoot this out of a homemade bow and arrow. The idea behind this is it's very small and it's very lightweight, and it's for cutting grass or vegetation, because you can get a lot of swing out of this thing, okay? Now, it's like, say for example, that you was in some sort of a situation where you needed to make bedding, like you had some grass that you had to cut. It'd take forever because you just couldn't get the swing out of a knife. But you add a little bit of length to it, see? That length makes your contact tool become an impact tool, all right? And you won't have to bend over as much. Like whenever you're cutting grass, you'll be holding the grass up and then you'll be cutting it, okay? And you'll be swinging away from your body and you got a little bit of swing to it. All right, now that we've gotten those two examples taken care of, all right, these are as far as I know, these are probably the only two examples that you've ever seen. A lot of you probably hadn't seen this one, the idea behind the short stick grass cutter. But these are the only two examples that I think you've probably seen of knives tied to sticks. So I am going to show you a different way of tying a knife to a stick, okay? So, a little philosophy behind that, and then we're going to go looking for a stick. So let's say you've stumbled yourself into a bad situation, or as the popular saying, a survival situation, and all you have is a knife, all right? What can you do with a knife? Can you build a shelter with it? Yeah, maybe. But what if you have to have some chopping to do for whatever reason, okay? If you want to turn this from a contact tool to an impact tool. See how short the blade is? It's not very heavy and it's not very long, okay? You'll need this and some cordage in your old brain. Now, most knives like this with a sheath have some cordage wadded up in the back here. So let's pull this out and look at it. This has never been taken off. This is neat cordage. It's either extra cordage or it's cordage that you can wrap around your leg to keep your knife from flopping around everywhere. All right? You can either use the cordage that's with you, or you can even take the boot laces off your boots if you're wearing boots. All right? In a pinch, sneaker laces will work. Any kind of cordage you have with you. And if you're smart, you walk around with paracord in your pocket like I do. So let's see what we can do with this one knife to turn this into a chopping tool. All right? You with me now? All right, let's get down to the nuts and bolts of the video. What you want to do is you want to try to find a branch of some kind laying on the ground that's still pretty solid. Pick a branch like some laying in this pile right here, and you want to beat them against a tree to see how much integrity and strength that they still have. See, that one broke. This one's kind of long, but it may be bigger. Oh! Now we're getting somewhere. Now you can see the end of this branch is broken off. The other end is broken it off. So what you want to do is you want to choose a diameter that's a couple of feet long. I think we're going to go with about right here. And you want to try to break this off between two screws. So let's go right over here. Let's see. Let's go this way. See if I can break this off. right. Now that gives me even more confidence because it took a lot to break this off. And what I've got here now is it's about, I can spread out, it's about arm's length. All right. So next thing, I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do next. So we have our branch, and where I broke it off at the tree, I can see this is some good solid wood. All right. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna look for a spot on here where I have a quarter of the length above the knife. Okay. I have about 3/4 below the knife and a quarter right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife and see this little gap in the back here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to carve this area, get rid of the bark. Let's move you over here so I can wedge it against this tree. So you can hold it against this tree, get more carving pressure. I've already got a natural curve to this wood. I see that's almost perfect right here. So what I'm going to do now is right there, I have complete support on this blade, on the back side right here. See how I have that complete support, and then I have some weight outside. So what I'm doing is I'm adding length. This end adds length. This end adds weight. Because if you had this tied out to the end, the pressure would be on the binding. This way I'm putting pressure on the actual wood, and I have weight forward that an impact tool needs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bind this to this thing with some cordage. Let me get a little bit more right here. Because you want as perfect of a fit as possible, because you can possibly break a knife if you leave a gap in it. So, let's see. Cut a little bit more off right here so that my handle will see a little bit better. A little bit more here. Now I feel pretty confident with that right there. That's a pretty good fit, so let's tie it to it. I have everything ready to go just like this. All right. Now when you're tying something like this, whenever you're putting pressure on your wrapping or frapping, you really want to be leery of this blade. You don't want to be pulling or putting pressure on your cordage to where you're going to slip and bump into this blade. So you just want to try to get comfortable however you can, and if you have to, turn the blade down low like this. All right. So what you want to do is you want to get it started with a starter knot, and then whatever your choice of frapping is, or if you want to start with a jam knot, either way works. Whoa, big old spider! Oh man, big old spider! That's something that you don't want to do. Alright, let me start over here a minute. Now like I say, you can do this with your bootlaces. I'm going to leave that in because that's real life. That's the way things go. Alright. Now see, I'm pulling for my first knot here. I'm pulling away from the blade. Alright, I'm pulling away. Alright. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a couple of wraps, a couple of knots, a couple of wraps, a couple of knots. Now my wrapping is going to be very sloppy, but it'll serve its purpose. Now you can use the genuine frapping technique, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll do a few loops and then I'll make a regular loop. I guess that's what you call it. And then I'll run this through. Whatever sloppy wrapping you can do. that whatever binding you can do that is that'll hold your knife. And then I'll run it through and then pull it around, and that puts pressure on it, because if you just tie something off and you put a bunch of loops through it, all those loops are going to get loose. But every couple of loops, if you'll put well, wraps, I need to call them wraps, okay? I'm not big on knot terminology, but if you do some wraps and then put a loop in and then tie through the loop and then stretch it back around, then every section will be held tight. If you do the genuine frapping, to me, the frapping, all you're going to do is once you tighten it up at the end, you're going to pull your wraps down towards one section. So to me, there's going to be a lot of people that's going to disagree with this, but this is just how the way I do things. See, I'll put some pressure on there like that, and then I'll hold that with my hand. All right, then I'll go around, and then this will be my loop. See if I can get it where you can see it. I'm going to make a loop right here, and then hold it with my hand, and then I'm going to come back around and go through this. Now remember, see where my hand is, you got to be careful with that blade. Alright, now I'm holding this with my thumb, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull around that loop I just made, and say I'm pulling it real tight with my hand, and it's now locking it in. And then I'll make a couple of more loops. You can kind of see right here how it is. So I'm just going to continue to do that until it's tied in. Closer view. Okay, I did 3 more wraps. Okay, and then I'm going to come around. Now at the 4th time, instead of wrapping around, I'm going to make a loop, and I'm going to hold it with my hand because I don't want this to get loose. And then I'm going to take this cordage, I guess you call that the bite. I call it the end. And then you just put it through the loop, and then you pull it around. And see, if you just had all wraps, they could get loose. But you've got wraps locked into loops. Alright. I know there's better frapping and wrapping out there, but you know, this works for me. Alright, so now we have the finished product. Okay. It's a knife tied to a stick. But it's where I tied it to the stick. The pressure's not just necessarily on my binding, because the blade is backed up by the wood. Okay? And then I have some length over here. Now, as long as the stick is not too rotten, then you should be good to go. And then I've got some length for swinging. Alright. So let's see how this thing chops. Let's see if it did good, or if it's made an idiot out of me. I try to use as little cordage as possible, as if it was simulating using some bootlaces. In real life, you know, the more cordage the better. Now as far as chopping, let's start out small just to see how the stick holds up and how the wrapping holds up. But I've got the length that I need. Looks good so far. Now see, it's wanting to twist. That's where the carving comes in handy. Matter of fact, you might even want to cut a groove in there. But all knives are shaped different. It's twisting a little bit. But it's doing good for chopping. Yeah. Now as far as chopping a really big log, this ain't a machete, but it will work for certain reasons, certain purposes. Let's try another one. See if we can do this one. Kind of broke that one. I think it did all right. This knife's kind of dull. Yeah, it's kind of dull. If it was sharper, it'd be better, but I think you get the basic idea. It's a half a cut and a half a break. That's what makes it an impact tool. Now, I would chop down a little green tree with this, but I don't want everybody complaining. Now, this thing takes some tweaking. It doesn't always work perfect, but every time. Your frapping's got to be good and tight. The back has to be carved to hold the blade good and steady so that when it comes with the impact, it doesn't twist, which sometimes happens. And you're not always able to use a knife. Like if it's the kind that doesn't have a flat back, if it's got the finger guards, you can't use it this way. But this is just a little something to keep into your old brain there, or a little something to play around with if you want to practice with it. But you're giving yourself the way forward. So hope you learned something. Hope you had fun. Get out, play around with these techniques. Keep it in the old brain. You never know when you make and use it. And we shall see you in the next one. See, it's twisting.